Discrimination laws can be confusing, and interviewers sometimes find themselves surprised at what questions can be considered discriminatory. With time and effort, however, interviewers can get the information needed for decision-making without violating the law. These guidelines on appropriate interview questions can reduce your risk of discrimination claims and ensure you ask the best possible questions in your next interview process. To start our conversation, we need to understand what a protected class is. Protected classes are groups of people with a common characteristic who are legally protected from employment discrimination on the basis of that characteristic. Protected classes are created both by federal and state law. The primary objective of anti-discrimination legislation is to ensure that individuals are given equal opportunity in the workplace. These federal protected classes include race, color, religion, national origin, sex, age, physical or mental disability, veteran status, genetic information, and citizenship. For more information about state-specific protected classes, check with your state department responsible for anti-discrimination. For more information about protected classes, see Greg's Protected Classes on the Greg Learning YouTube channel. I'll post a link for that video below. Now, let's review interview questions from an anti-discrimination perspective, focusing on several protected classes issues that commonly arise in interview questions. Age is protected by Title VII of the Civil Rights Act and various state human rights laws. Often, employers give candidates the impression that they're making an employment decision based on age. For example, there may be many jobs that minors are not allowed to perform, such as serving alcohol or using certain types of equipment. Be sure to phrase your questions so that you do not imply age discrimination. Let's take a look at a couple questions. Instead of asking, "When did you graduate?" or "When do you tend to retire?" ask, "Tell me about your education and experience as it relates to the position." Physical and mental disability is protected by the Americans with Disabilities Act known as the ADA. Interview questions in regard to mental or physical disability status must be avoided in your interviews. Employers can also make further medical and disability-related inquiries after the job offer has been made. It's common, for example, for employers to require workers to submit to physical examinations post-offer or pre-employment. These types of inquiries should be made under a uniformly applied policy and not aimed at specific individuals who are suspected of having medical or disability problems. Further, these requirements must be related to some job-related requirement, something the individual has to do with the essential functions of the job. Let's take a look at some interview questions. So, instead of asking, "Do you have a disability?" "Have you filed a workers' compensation claim?" or "Do you have a history of drug or alcohol abuse?" ask, "Can you do the duties listed in the job description with or without reasonable accommodation?" providing the applicant a chance to review the job description. If a worker has an obvious disability or reveals a hidden disability, you may ask the person to describe or determine how the applicant would perform the essential duties of the job. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act ensures discrimination on the basis of religion is avoided in your selection process. Limit your questions about outside activities to those that are only relevant to the essential functions of the job. Asking about volunteer work or membership may elicit information you don't want, such as religious or political work. Let's take a look at some interview questions. Instead of asking, "What outside activities do you participate in?" ask, "What professional associations are you a member of?" When it comes to sex or gender, there are several applicable regulations. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, the Pregnancy Discrimination Act, which is an amendment to Title VII, and state laws on discrimination based on marital status impact interview questions relating to sex and gender. Assumptions about traditional family roles can adversely impact women's employment opportunities. It's best to avoid these family-related questions for both sexes. Let's take a look at some interview questions. Instead of asking, "Are you married?" "When do you plan to start a family?" or "Do you have children?" ask, "Are you available to travel frequently?" or "Can you work overtime with no notice?" Again, make sure that these questions are job-related and specific to the essential duties. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act and the Immigration Reform and Control Act cover citizenship as a protected class. The IRCA prohibits discrimination based on the citizenship status of a candidate. Let's take a look at some interview questions. Instead of asking, "Are you a citizen of the United States?" "What country are you from?" "Where's your accent from?" or "What nationality is your last name?" Ask, if you're hired, are you able to provide documentation to prove that you're eligible to work in the United States? And, in all practicality, this question is unnecessary in many interview processes. Both the Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act provide protections to members of the uniformed services. Interview questions should avoid discrimination against past and present members of uniformed services. Note that military discharge status may contain information about disability discharges. Let's take a look at some interview questions. Instead of, "Please provide the status of your military discharge," or "Will you miss work to perform military service?" ask, "What experience did you gain in the uniformed service relevant to this position?" When writing your next interview questions or interviewing your next candidate, consider protected classes as you ask and develop your questions. Best practice suggests that questions are job-related. Your job as an interviewer is to ensure no intentional disparate treatment or perceived unintentional adverse impact based on those protected classes exists in your interview and selection process.